What happens to a marriage when the words, I love you, simply disappear for decades? Does love die? Or does it learn another language? I'm 88 years old, and before you judge us, let me break the ice by telling you something honest. Love doesn't always look like the movies. Sometimes it stops speaking in words and starts surviving in gestures, routines, and quiet presence. In our case, 45 years passed without those three famous words, and yet our lives stayed tied together every single day. In the beginning, we said, I love you, all the time. We were young, nervous, laughing at everything, promising forever like only young people can. Then life got louder. Bills, children, sickness, work, disappointments, misunderstandings that no one had the energy to fully discuss. One day, the words just weren't said. Not out of anger, but out of fatigue. And when they didn't come back the next day, a strange thing happened. Silence became comfortable. It turned into habit, and habit turned into our language. But don't think there was no love. Love was there at 5 a.m. when he made coffee without asking how I take it, because he already knew. Love was there when he fixed every broken chair before anyone noticed they were broken. Love was in the way he walked on the traffic side of the sidewalk, always quietly placing himself between me and danger. We stopped declaring love out loud, but we started hiding it in the ordinary, in the unphotographed moments nobody applauds. Still, there were nights when I lay awake wondering, did he forget? Did he stop feeling it? Or did I? And instead of asking, I stayed silent too. Pride, fear, habit. They all look the same after so many years. Our marriage became a house built on unspoken things, strong and fragile at the same time, full of gestures and empty of confession. And the question stayed suspended between us like air. What is love when it no longer speaks? We learned to read each other without words, to apologize, with a cup of tea, to forgive by sitting side by side in the same room after an argument, television playing something neither of us really watched. Our life turned into proof that love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers so softly that only the two people inside it can hear. And yet, after 45 years, something inside me wanted to know whether the words were still alive somewhere, or if they had truly vanished. If this part of the story resonates with you, I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments what love looks like in your life today, and whether you believe words are necessary or if actions can speak just as loudly. Your perspective matters because stories like these are about understanding what relationships truly become over time. If you're finding meaning here, don't forget to leave a like. It helps this message reach more people who might need it. And if you want to follow the rest of this confession and other life stories like it, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. What if love doesn't fade? It just stops dressing itself in the same clothes. After those first years of burning romance, something in our marriage shifted. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but like a slow tide changing direction while you're not paying attention. We stopped saying, I love you, but we didn't stop living as two people whose lives were woven together. Instead of words, love began showing up in quieter ways, the kinds of gestures you only notice when you're old enough to look back and realize what they meant. He never remembered anniversaries, but he remembered exactly how my knees hurt when it rained and would leave my favorite blanket on the chair. He didn't give speeches about feelings, but he checked the locks every single night because he knew I slept better that way. I didn't write long romantic letters. I packed his lunch even on days when we barely spoke. We fought, we grew tired, we aged, but beneath all of it, there was this constant invisible thread saying what our mouths no longer did. Actions became our language. Habits became sentences. Silence became its own kind of conversation. Years went by and other people judged from outside. Some said we were cold. Others thought we'd stopped loving each other entirely. They didn't see the way he slowed his steps so I wouldn't walk alone, or how he pretended not to notice when I cried in the kitchen, simply standing close enough for me to feel his presence. Love changed shape. It stopped being fireworks and became a steady flame that refused to go out, even when life threw wind at it. But there was also a cost. Without words, misunderstandings grew roots. Feelings went unspoken for so long they hardened. Sometimes I wanted to shout, "Say it just once, just so I know." But the years had taught us both a kind of emotional economy. We saved words like they were expensive, and sometimes that silence hurt more than we admitted. Still, even pain became part of the way we loved. Imperfect, human, stubborn, unfinished. And deep down, I kept wondering if one day those 3 words would return, or if our story would remain written entirely between the lines, waiting for the moment life forced us to face everything we never said. There were seasons when love didn't look beautiful at all. It looked like fatigue, like 2 people sitting at the same table and not knowing what to say anymore. We went through financial worries, illness, sleepless nights with children, losses we never fully processed. Those were the years when our silence wasn't gentle, it was heavy. We didn't say, "I love you," but we also didn't say how scared we were, how lonely we felt inside the same house. And so we made quiet decisions. To stay, to endure, to keep choosing each other even when the feelings didn't feel magical. There were arguments that lasted days, not because we kept talking about them, but because we stopped talking at all. He'd fix something around the house instead of apologizing. I'd cook his favorite meal instead of admitting I was hurt. We both pretended those gestures were enough, and sometimes they were. Other times they were bandages on wounds that really needed words. But we were children of a generation that believed love meant staying, not explaining. You carried your pain like you carried groceries, silently, because everyone else was doing the same. There were moments I wondered what my life might have looked like if we had spoken more honestly, if I had said how afraid I was of being invisible, if he had admitted how much pressure he felt to be strong all the time. Instead, we showed our emotions in sideways ways. He worked extra hours when he was worried. I cleaned when I was sad. We loved each other imperfectly, stubbornly, like people trying to hold a house together during a storm without admitting the roof was leaking. Yet even in the hardest times, we didn't leave. There is a kind of devotion that doesn't shine but doesn't break either. We went to bed angry and still reached for the same blanket. We disagreed and still saved the last piece of bread for the other. We grew older, and with age came the realization that many marriages end not because there is no love, but because nobody knows how to say what hurts. We were no different. We just stayed anyway. Looking back, I see our marriage as a map of unspoken feelings: regret, pride, loyalty, tenderness, and exhaustion all living under the same roof. And despite every quiet wound, every missed conversation, there was always that invisible promise beneath it all. I am still here. Sometimes that sentence meant more than "I love you," even though part of me still longed to hear the words out loud, just once, in the clear air of an ordinary day. There are words that never cross the lips yet live permanently in the space between 2 people. In our house, whole conversations existed without sound. A squeeze of the hand at the doctor's office meant "I'm scared." A plate left covered in the oven meant "I was thinking of you." The chair pulled closer to mine during the evening news meant "Stay with me." To outsiders, nothing extraordinary happened. But beneath those ordinary gestures flowed a deep current of attachment we rarely dared to name. Love, for us, was not a performance. It was a presence. I kept boxes, little artifacts of emotions we didn't speak. Old receipts from cafes where we sat in comfortable silence. Movie tickets from nights when our hands brushed and neither of us moved away. A faded photograph he slipped into my coat pocket without saying a word. He had his own archive, too, I later discovered. Notes I'd written on grocery lists, my handwriting on the back of family pictures, the buttons I'd sewn back on his shirts. We were archiving feelings we could never quite voice, as if saving proof for a future version of ourselves who might need reminding that love had always been here. There were letters I wrote and never gave him. Lines like, "I miss the way you used to look at me," and "I wish you'd say it again, just once." I tucked them away because I didn't want to break the fragile peace our silence created. And sometimes, in the quiet before sleep, I felt him reaching for my hand in the dark. The simplest confession of all. Not leaving my side, not turning away, just staying. That small gesture said more than any elaborate declaration ever could. We became experts at reading the unsaid. I could tell when his back pain was worse, even when he insisted he was fine. He knew when my smile meant, "I'm tired," instead of, "I'm happy." Our love was written in eye contact, in shared sighs after long days, in the way he stood behind me at the sink, just close enough for me to lean back into him without a word. The world often confuses quiet love with absent love, but the truth is, ours was everywhere, just less loud. Yet the unspoken has edges. Questions live there too. Did he ever long to say the words again? Did he miss hearing them from me? Did he ever worry, as I did, that silence might someday be mistaken for indifference? These questions lingered, gentle but persistent, like a song you can't quite stop humming. They followed us into older age, into slower mornings and longer afternoons, where memory and present time began to sit side by side. So much of our story lives between sentences, in pauses, in glances that lasted a second longer than usual. And I realized something quietly extraordinary. Love doesn't vanish just because it changes language. It can live in gestures, routines, breath, nearness. But even then, a part of me wondered what might happen if those 3 words ever resurfaced after all these years, whether they would feel fragile like glass or strong like something that had been waiting patiently in the dark. Love that doesn't speak out loud is confusing for those who only recognize it by sound. Our children grew up in a house where "I love you" was not said, and they carried questions we didn't answer. They saw other parents hugging in kitchens, leaving sticky notes with hearts on the fridge, saying the words easily in front of everyone. In our home, love was quieter, wrapped in routines, expressed in rides to school at dawn, in mended clothes, in showing up to every important moment without fanfare. To them, it sometimes looked like distance, like we were simply 2 old partners sharing a life out of habit. As they grew older, they began to ask, sometimes gently, sometimes angrily, if we still loved each other at all. "You never say it," one of them told me once, standing in the doorway with hurt in their eyes. How could I explain that our love had become something lived rather than spoken? That the way he cut fruit for me in the morning was a sentence? That the way I remembered his medicines was another? They were raised in a world that believes love must be loud to be real. We belonged to a time when emotion often hid itself behind responsibility and care. There were family gatherings where they joked about us being cold, and we laughed along. But the words stayed with me afterward. I wondered whether our silence had unintentionally taught them that affection shouldn't be voiced, or whether it had simply made them hungry for the words we didn't say to each other. Grandchildren hugged freely, said "love you" into phones without hesitation, and sometimes I envied that ease. It made me question whether we had protected our hearts or simply forgotten how to open our mouths. Yet they didn't see the smaller language we shared. They didn't see the way he waited to start eating until I sat down, every single time. They didn't see the way my hand automatically reached for his in crowded places. They didn't see him standing outside the bathroom door longer than necessary when I wasn't feeling well. They saw silence. We felt connection. 2 different translations of the same story. Still, their confusion mattered. It forced me to look closely at our life and admit that while love had stayed, clarity had not. Had we made love seem invisible to the people we raised? Had we mistaken endurance, for example? Those questions lingered, softer now but present, especially as we aged and time felt thinner. Our children wanted reassurance, and a part of me wanted it too. The simple, undeniable comfort of hearing the words spoken aloud after so many years of devotion expressed in everything but sound. Sometimes it takes a moment of fear to shine a harsh, honest light on everything you've been avoiding for decades. For us, it happened on an ordinary afternoon that broke apart without warning. He collapsed in the kitchen, the sound of a glass shattering on the floor echoing through the house like a gunshot. In that instant, all the years of silence, all the unspoken words, all the quiet habits fell away, and there was only one thought in my mind. Please don't leave me. I knelt beside him, my hands shaking, calling his name again and again, as if the sound alone could pull him back to me. In the ambulance, with the siren wailing, time stretched and folded at once. Memories rushed in. Our first apartment, the babies we held, the arguments we never finished, the birthdays we forgot to celebrate properly, every morning coffee, every shared worry. I realized how much life we had lived together without saying the simplest truths out loud. The fear of losing him cut through my pride, my habits, my carefully built calm. I understood then how fragile our ordinary days had always been, how everything we assumed would continue could disappear in a blink. At the hospital, waiting in a plastic chair that felt far too small, I made silent promises no one heard. If he wakes up, I thought, I'll say it. I will not leave those words buried anymore. It wasn't drama, it was clarity. Love that is never spoken risks being mistaken for silence, and suddenly that possibility terrified me more than anything. I imagined our children remembering us as distant, imagined him leaving this world never hearing what had lived in my chest all along. The weight of that regret pressed on me like a stone. He did wake up, groggy, confused, but alive. The doctor called it a warning, not the end. A scare, they said, like it was a small word. But for me, it was an earthquake. When they let me into his room, tubes and monitors surrounding him, he looked smaller than he ever had, almost like the young man I married underneath all the years. He reached for my hand without a word, the same gesture we had always used, and for a moment, I almost slipped back into our familiar silence. But something had shifted. I could hear the faint ticking of time in that quiet hospital room, louder than any machine. I understood that life does not wait for courage, and that postponing feelings is just another way of gambling with them. I opened my mouth, feeling the years of reluctance trembling in my throat, knowing that if I didn't speak now, I might never get another chance. When I finally spoke, the words felt unfamiliar in my mouth, like a language I hadn't practiced in decades. I whispered, "I love you," almost afraid they would break in the air before they reached him. For a second, he just stared at me, eyes wide, like time itself had stopped to listen. Then something astonishing happened. He laughed, not loudly, but softly, with relief, with disbelief, with a tenderness I hadn't seen in years. "I know," he said, voice cracked and trembling, "and I love you too." 45 years of silence dissolved in one fragile moment. It wasn't dramatic music or fireworks. It was two old people in a hospital room, hands shaking, realizing we had been speaking the same feeling all along in different ways. He told me something I didn't expect. He said he stopped saying the words years ago because he thought I already knew, and he was afraid that repeating them too often would make them sound routine instead of real. He believed his duty, his presence, his fixing, his staying were stronger than any sentence. Meanwhile, I had stayed quiet because I feared if I asked for the words, I would sound needy, ungrateful for the life we had built. We had both been protecting each other from a pain we never actually named, building walls out of good intentions and calling them comfort. That day didn't magically rewrite our past. We still had the years of silence, of misunderstandings, of feelings tucked away like fragile papers in drawers. But something subtle shifted. We began saying small things out loud again. Thank you. I was scared. I missed you. The words came slowly at first, like muscles waking after a long sleep. And yet, we didn't abandon our old language either. He still checks the doors at night. I still set aside the ripest piece of fruit for him. We realized we didn't have to choose between words and gestures. Love had space for both. Now in our late 80s, we move carefully through days that feel precious, aware of how thin time has become. We don't chase grand gestures. We sit together, share stories we thought we'd forgotten, and sometimes we just hold hands without speaking. But when he stands up, turns back to me before leaving the room, and says quietly, "I love you," it lands on me with the full weight of every year we've lived. Not because we say it often, but because we finally stopped hiding from it. Our marriage didn't become perfect. It became honest. And honesty has a warmth I wish we had dared to let in sooner. If you stayed with me all the way to the end, thank you. Stories like this matter because they remind us that love is not only what we say, it is also what we do, what we endure, and what we quietly choose every day. But they also remind us of something uncomfortable. Time is not generous, and the words we keep inside can turn into regrets if we wait too long. If this made you think about your own marriage, your parents, your partner, or someone you miss, don't just scroll away. Take a second and put something real in the comments. I want you to comment this exact phrase: still here, still loving. If you've ever struggled to say what you feel, write it anyway. If you've ever loved someone in silence, write it anyway. It helps other people feel less alone, and it tells the algorithm this conversation is worth spreading. And if this story gave you something to hold on to, please leave a like. Not for me, but because it pushes this video to people who might need the reminder before it's too late. And subscribe to the channel if you want more real, emotional life stories like this one, the kind that don't sugarcoat marriage, aging, love, loss, and the secrets people carry for decades. Now, don't go yet. The next video is appearing on your screen, and I promise it will hit you in a different way. Click it, keep watching, and I'll meet you there.